So World War Three, eh? It's an ever growing threat, and right now I'm hoping clearer heads prevail. And this is a story that happened yesterday, and I wanted my Thanksgiving live stream to be more cheerful, But this is a story that we cannot ignore, as there's been a couple of updates in regards to the situation with the horrific conflict and war that is happening in Ukraine. And as this war continues on and the Biden-Harris administration seem to be pushing ever harder for a conflict with Putin, giving in moral weapons and money, for giving $4.7 billion in debt. This is one of those points where I'm hoping that the new boss coming in doesn't act like the old boss, because I don't want to say, hey, meet the new boss. It's a new boss, same as the old boss, and nothing fundamentally changes. But when those nukes be a dropping and the mushroom clouds in the sky and the wall of flame vaporizes everything, we're never rebuilding to this level of technology. So I'm ever hopeful that Trump and the incoming administration could, I don't know, controversial statement, 3, 2, 1, calm things down just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. Maybe turn it from 11, make it to a 2. How about a 0? Zero's a number. How about 0.0? How about a negative 0.0%? I know that's not a real number, but I just don't want to get vaporized, okay? And I think all of you don't want to be vaporized either. So Trump to push for Ukrainian ceasefire before talks. So U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will likely try to bring about a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict before attempting to push Moscow and Kiev to the negotiating table, CNN reported on Wednesday, citing anonymous sources. Yeah, Trump, listen. Hey, Barron, the off chance you listen to Hardlands Media, tell your pops to stop it, okay? Whatever. The Republican claimed on the campaign trail that he could end hostilities between Russia and Ukraine within 24 hours if reelected into the White House. People in Trump's orbit have put forward competing ideas, which are being reviewed by Mike Waltz, the president-elect's pick for a national security advisor, according to CNN. I'm not holding my breath here, but I am ever hopeful for the possibility. But hey, hope in one hand, crap in the other. See which one fills up faster. The discussions are still at an early stage. Two sources familiar with the issue told the network few advocate Ukrainian membership of NATO, the report said. There's also reports going out that that possibly Ukraine is even looking at conscripting younger men, teenagers, possibly to the front lines. So many people have died for nothing. There's a wide gap between the conditions that officials in Russia and Ukraine have respectively outlined for a diplomatic engagement. Andriy Yermak, the powerful chief of staff of Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky, this week told the Swedish outlet Dagens Industry that a return to the pre-2022 situation would be a good starting point. Yeah, like before the war started, because it seemed to me that during the time, not a lot of people were dying. The remark apparently backtracks on Kiev's previous demand for full control over the territory to which it lays claim, including Crimea, before any negotiations could happen. I don't think Russia is going to let go of any of its territory. Before Kiev launched an incursion into the Russia's Kursk region in August, Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged to order a ceasefire as soon as Ukraine drops its ambition to join NATO and withdraws its troops from former Ukrainian regions which have joined Russia. The proposal has now been withdrawn. According to Moscow, no talks can happen as long as there's a Ukrainian presence in the Kursk region. Kiev wants to hold on to the seized land and use it as a bargaining chip. Several Trump allies have outlined how they believe the conflict could be resolved. Keith Kellogg, Trump's pick to be special envoy on the Ukraine conflict, wants to freeze military compact and suspend Kiev's bid for NATO membership. Richard Grenly, Trump's former ambassador to Germany, who was also considered for national security advisor, has urged the creation of autonomous zones as part of a settlement. Russian forces have been rapidly gaining ground on the front line in recent months. Some Ukrainian military officials have warned that Kiev's forces are on the verge of collapse. Now, I also want to pull this up here, too, because Boris Johnson wanted to weigh in. We're waging a proxy war. Boris, you crazy-haired bastard. You got 29 seconds. Speak.
We are, let's face it, we're waging a proxy war. We're waging a proxy war, but we're not giving our proxies the ability to do the job. And for years and years now, we've been allowing them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and it has been cruel. it has been cruel, and we need now to give them what they need.
Yes, because more war. But you're calling it a proxy war. I want to pull this article up from Catlin Johnstone. I think it's only fair that we listen to its full entirety. I will keep my pausing to a minimum, but this video in question, Ukrainians and Americans are done with this war, but it keeps escalating anyway. The Biden administration is now pushing Ukraine to lower its minimum draft age from 25 to 18 in order to provide more cannon fodder for the war against Russia. Hey, you U.S. politicians so super hard for war? You know what the ancient Romans did, like the politicians before the Republic became an empire? Even if they were truly incompetent and stupid, those jagoffs booted up and suited up and served on the front lines. I don't see any of you senators or House representatives doing that. I mean, you're so keen on making war, making profit off of war. Go to the front line, politicians. Hey, Biden, put on Caesar's red cloak. Try not to crap in it.
Ukrainians and Americans are done with this war, but it keeps escalating anyway. Notes from the edge of the narrative matrix. The IDF dramatically increased its bombing campaign in Lebanon on Tuesday in the hours preceding an expected ceasefire with Hezbollah. Israel always does this, and it's so gross. Normal people get a ceasefire agreement and think, good, this means we can finally stop fighting. Israel gets a ceasefire agreement and goes, this means we have to hurry up and kill as many people as possible before it takes effect. The Biden administration is now pushing Ukraine to lower its minimum draft age from 25 to 18 in order to provide more cannon fodder for the war against Russia. Polls say that both Ukrainians and Americans want this U.S. proxy war to end. But instead of ending it, Washington is pressuring Kyiv to throw teenagers into the threshing machine of an unwinnable conflict. And we were told this war was about protecting democracy. Russia keeps getting hit by Ukraine with U.S.-supplied long-range missiles and is now saying that retaliatory actions are being prepared. This happens as Trump appoints virulent Russia hawk Keith Kellogg as his envoy to the conflict, adding further weight to my concerns that these soaring tensions may continue to escalate after Trump gets into office. I'll say right now that if all this insane brinkmanship results in Russia hitting Ukraine with a tactical nuke or something, I'll be a lot more enraged at the Western power structure I live under for giving rise to that horror than I will be at Vladimir Putin. Don't side with the powerful. Don't side with Israel against the Palestinians. Don't side with the U.S. empire against any nation it targets. Don't side with cops against their victims. Don't side with billionaires and politicians against the people. Don't side with the powerful. Every 4 years, Americans get to choose between the Republican Party and the party that consistently leaves them so disgusted that they then vote for the Republican Party. The way American liberals spent months trying to whip up support and enthusiasm for an administration that was committing an active genocide exposed the disdain Western liberals have for non-Western lives in ways that will be remembered for generations. Leftist indie media figures tend to drift to the right, either by shilling for liberal establishment politics or by promoting the faux populism of the Trump faction. This happens because when your business model is largely driven by clicks and views, you have an incentive to go where the mainstream numbers are. They don't start off thinking, I can't wait to sell out and covertly promote the interests of the power structures I claim to oppose.
And I can look at a couple outlets. ZYT. Sorry, had to bring them up. Sammy Boy Cedar. Pod Save America. There's a lot of people, right? Especially who tied up with the Democratic establishment. Then you also have others who are more inclined to goose step with, I don't know, the whole idea of thinking that Trump's going to usher in a new era. Look, as far as I'm concerned, both parties are one and the same. both parties, both parties, both parties, both parties are on board with this war. All these wars and constantly screwing us over. I mean, when they talk about doing tax breaks, it's not for you, the working class. When they talk about, getting involved in politics overseas, it's not about promoting peace, infrastructure, and trade. It's about war, conquest, destruction, genocide. They talk about, energy. It's about drilling into, protected areas, nature reserves, all that stuff to dig up that oil. There's never a concern over all these long term consequences. And yet, so many people are thinking that what, just because there's a new political power in office, that things will change. Biden said it the best: nothing will ever fundamentally change. Democrats and Republicans vote for war. Okay. They do that. So when you send your congressman and woman to the United States Senate and House, they're voting and listening to their donors, the power structure.
They just see their virality go up when they talk one way compared to another and start putting out the kind of content that generates more. Independent media does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in an information environment that's saturated in empire propaganda, which is designed to herd the public into two power-serving mainstream political factions. By changing their output to align with the mainstream liberal faction or the mainstream right-wing faction, indie media creators are effectively surfing on the tide of these propaganda streams to carry them into fame and fortune. This effect is further exacerbated by the fact that people tend to become more right-wing the wealthier and more well-connected they become. The idea of fighting a class war against the ruling class is suddenly a lot less appealing when you're a millionaire with a lot of rich celebrity friends and high-level political connections. So you'll naturally find yourself pushing vapid culture war bullshit instead, and restricting your criticisms of status quo politics to a much smaller zone. This happens to align perfectly with what the empire propagandists are doing, so you'll still get plenty of clicks and views. This doesn't happen to you if you actually stand for something and get into indie media for principled reasons. But if you just got into it to have a cool job or whatever, then you're just going to do the job thing with it and do whatever makes you money. It's pretty easy to see who lands where on this dynamic. If you're interested in awakening and enlightenment, check out the work of Angelo De Lullo. Nobody in the English-speaking world is talking about the how-to of liberation so lucidly and skillfully, and sharing helpful information so freely. He's got an excellent YouTube channel with his videos categorized into playlists for whatever stage people are at on their awakening journey.
Now, there's something else here too, because with all this stuff that's going on, when we look at the political establishment, when we look at the system and how information is being censored, because when we look at how our own media has silenced and suppressed people, a lot of people, especially those who've done a lot of hard work in independent media, lost their livelihoods because of them speaking truth to power. I know that Convo Couch, their channel got decimated. I know Slow News Day got his channel decimated. INN, my goodness, Indie News Network, and I can't say enough good things about them, have been on the forefront of really leading the way. And I was glad to have a lot of their members join me as special guest co-hosts for the November 5th election coverage. It was very important that we at least talk about that. But so many people have been censored and suppressed because they were talking about either the pandemic or even the war in Ukraine. And we live in a time now where now there's going to be a shift. Now, even right now, as we're talking about this, the war is still happening. Lowering the conscription age now to 18. And yet Congress and Biden are talking about giving billions of dollars more to Ukraine. Pardoning potentially $4.7 billion. A true debt forgiveness that we, the American people, will never get. All lies will be exposed, and it will be done. But never forget what happened. Never forget how all these politicians were making so much money on the side. I want to pull up something else here as well, because there is going to be a point where if the Democrats or anybody else, including Republican lawmakers, have their way, they'll be more than happy to implement more censorship and deplatforming. Case in point right here. I want to pull this up here. For somebody, unfortunately, it might shock you, but don't worry, it's only 18 seconds. A sign of things to come.
And boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda, and whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence, because then
charging, arresting, arrest them all. Please charge and arrest and charge. You know, 1984 was a book. Fahrenheit 451 was a book. Brave New World was a book, and they all served as warnings. Who thought it was a good idea to staple them all together and make them into a manual for government policy?